We will never turn our back on a single Scot.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.
Hello and welcome to the latest Planet Holyrood. I'm Paul Hutcheon, political editor of the Daily Record. I'm joined by my two favourite guests. Well, not really, but they'll do. We've got the Daily Record head of news, Mark Smith, a.k.a. Smitty.
Hello.
And Ben Borland, currently the editor of the Scottish Daily Express. I didn't mean to throw shade there by saying currently.
Do you know something I don't?
Just before we begin, Ben, I had Ross Greer in the office a couple of Fridays ago. I know that the Daily Express is a big, big fan of Ross. We actually came looking for you, but you weren't in the office.
No, it was a Friday, so I wasn't in that day. I was working at home that day in this new hybrid world. But no, I did catch caught the interview. Thought it was very interesting. I mean, Ross has a lot to say for himself. We were just speaking before off camera, and I'd love to debate Ross.
Well, actually, I gave him your home address, so he's going to be chapping your door tonight. So,
right? Okay.
So look, TikTok, I think it's about 99 days to the Holyrood election, not long to go at all. So the polls basically show the SNP on course for a fifth term, a comfortable victory, probably not an outright majority indeed. I think certainly not an outright victory, and it looks like Reform and Labour, Smitty, are fighting out for second place. Or at least that's what the polls say right now. Yeah. So just playing devil's advocate, is it already over?
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of variables that are going to come into play as the campaign goes on. I think the SNP's record in government, they've been great on some stuff, by the way. This is not an SNP bad point I'm making, but they've been absolutely terrible on other things. I think service delivery in hospitals, I think there are educational failings, things like the ferries and all that, where money seems to have been wasted. I think when the spotlight homes in on the SNP's record of actual delivery of services in Scotland, I think the polls will start to narrow slightly there. And I think Labour will be the main beneficiary of that, because obviously Reform have nothing to say on how they're going to make your public services better. They don't know about how they're going to make your schools or hospitals better. They're purely about identity bullshit, So I think the polls will narrow. I think Labour, I'm not just saying that, the Record is looking at this campaign with an open mind, but I think Labour will start to narrow the gap. The problem will be, will Labour shoot themselves in the foot by infighting, and will that destroy any attempt Anas makes to really nail the SNP on service delivery? That will be a fascinating aspect of the campaign, I think.
Do you think there's going to come a point, maybe at the beginning of the campaign, where the focus shifts from Westminster, from Starmer, from that psychodrama onto the areas of responsibility of Holyrood, the schools, the hospitals, the justice, which would obviously then be bad for the SNP?
I certainly hope so. I think there's a sign it's already starting to shift. I think the ongoing story, I'm sure there's more to come on the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and did the SNP put pressure? We've got the story today saying that ministers did put pressure on the health board. I think that's the first big sign that, look, this is really going to refocus. And I think the polls will really narrow. I don't think it's a done deal by any stretch of the imagination. I think one of the main things will be this sort of general feeling that I think you pick up out there, and it was very prevalent ahead of the general election coming up 2 years ago. And I think I sense it in Scotland as well, that people want a change. It's not so much that everything the SNP has done has been terrible. I think there's just a sense that 19 years, let's give someone else a try. And really, the only other sensible option, as much as, obviously the Express, we back Russell Finlay, we're supportive of many of Reform's aims. The only other option really is Scottish Labour. I think the Scottish electorate will come home, if you like, to Labour. I think Labour. I think Labour are going to win it. I really do.
It's interesting that there seems to be across the world, the Western world, a sort of anti-politician, anti-establishment sort of theme. But the SNP, even though they are the party of government and they are the establishment party in Scotland, I don't think they're suffering from that trend. I think Labour are. I think Labour across the UK are looked at as a party that represents sort of traditional party lines and traditional ways of looking at the world. They seem to be suffering from that anti-politician backlash. The SNP don't, which is an interesting thing.
But it's also like it's anti-incumbency. It's like kicking out the government.
Yeah.
So the key thing in this election will be who do voters treat as the incumbent. Is it the SNP government in Edinburgh or is it the Labour government in London?
Well, the main thing is for Anas Sarwar, Jackie Bailey, the others at Scottish Labour, they've got to present themselves as a separate party. You know, they're linked to the UK Labour Party. And those links can be very valuable for Scotland. If you've got a party in power in Holyrood and the same, a different branch of the same party in power at Westminster, there's a lot of leverage there. But they've got to present themselves as a separate party.
Yeah. So I was at Westminster last week, Smitty, and obviously it was purely professional. Didn't go to any of the Westminster bars, didn't have any alcohol.
What was that noise in the background every time I rang you? It sounded like clinking glasses.
Oh, I might have gone to strangers once.
All right, yeah.
Maybe that's what it was.
Must have lasted 3 days.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
So I was talking to an MP, and he came up with this analogy, which I think you will recognise. I don't think you'll agree with it, but you'll recognise it about the SNP's poll lead. Basically compared it to Hearts being top of the table. And so basically what he said was that Hearts are top of the league, not because they're good in and of themselves, but it's a reflection of the weakness of the teams below them. So Hearts in this context being like the SNP.
It wasn't Ian Murray you were speaking to.
Well, what he said was that it doesn't take much for the others to start to pick up, and then that lead to narrow. And that's the analogy that was made.
My only difficulty with that analogy is that Hearts are clearly an outstanding footballing outfit, professionally run, doing everything right, getting the support from the punters, becoming a globally known brand for just being fantastic and standing up to the incumbents. So in that sense, nothing like the SNP. However, it's certainly true that we're up against a couple of giants who have foundered extremely badly this season, Hearts. So in that sense, the SNP's up against a couple of lumbering failures in the Tories and Labour. Yeah, and so I partly agree with the analogy, but like all analogies, it's probably.
I think Hearts are reforming this analogy, aren't they?
Surely
the newcomers.
Yeah, well,
newcomers against these two old,
It seems though
Labour
that
and the SNP,
in both contexts, there is a lead there. It's deserved, but it's soft.
It reflects the weakness of the opponent.
Yeah,
for sure.
I mean, and as a as a follower of Scottish and English football, I think Arsenal, you could say the exact same. I mean, let's not turn this into a football chat, but it's almost more accurate. Arsenal have got a bigger lead, but it looks wobblier than Hearts.
I think it is going to narrow. The question is it going to narrow sufficiently to put Anas Sarwar in Butte House?
It's difficult to see the route he takes to Butte House, isn't it? Because he's not going to jump in with reform.
There'll be a vote for First Minister, and the parties can do whatever they want.
The route is the same route that Alex Salmond, and I was looking back at some of the previous election results, and in 2007, Alex Salmond got 47 MSPs and managed to govern pretty successfully for 4 years.
Yes.
So I mean, he was what's that? You need 65 for a majority, so he's 17 short of a majority.
Yeah.
All Anas Sarwar has to do is have one more MSP than the SNP.
I don't think it even needs to be. Labour don't even need to be the largest party. I mean, if you've got a pro-UK majority, Labour could be second, and the pro-UK part could club together.
Yeah, I'm just ultimately the only piece of legislation you have to pass is a budget.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it would be difficult to do nothing else. But
It'd be tricky,
it
wouldn't
would
it?
be very tricky. But Salmon managed it, and
He did it with support from the Tories
from the
on the budget.
Tories.
didn't he?
Yeah, ironically enough.
Yeah, and
that old SNP Tory coalition, which we don't really hear much from the nationalists about.
yeah, you don't hear that much these days. But I remember that coalition. Or it
Yeah.
wasn't a coalition, sorry, but it was
budget.
it was a budget support mechanism.
A coalition in all but name.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, it wasn't. And I mean, the Tories back under Annabelle Goldie. I mean, this is going way back. Younger viewers probably will be amazed to hear this. The Tories were largely supportive and got some great deals, including the 1,000 extra police on the beat, which the SNP then took as their own policy, but obviously they've now given up. Cash for town centres. Lots of useful concessions were granted.
It's a different world now, though. Imagine Anas Sarwar only becoming First Minister because of support from Malcolm Offord in some sort of grand unionist alliance. That would be difficult for them to sell in future to Labour voters.
I mean, the Lib Dems come on board in a heartbeat.
So do the Tories.
If you offer the Lib Dems a fish supper, they'll probably.
I mean, this is the question for Ross Greer. You know, what did he mention that at all?
I mean, they wouldn't back Labour under any circumstances.
Really?
No.
I got the feeling Lorna Slater said she would. Did she not?
No, I mean, Ross Greer's steeped in the independence movement. He was part of Yes Scotland. He's got good relationships with SNP cabinet secretaries. He thinks that Labour don't respect the Greens. There's just no chance of a deal between those two parties. But I think, though, that we're talking about will Labour narrow the gap. I mean, what they want is for the focus to be on the Scottish Government and how they have failed in terms of their use of the devolved powers. The last thing they want is another bout of nonsense down south, which is exactly what we've got with Andy Burnham over the last few days. Andy Burnham, the the mayor of Greater Manchester, basically wanted to stand in a Westminster by-election. Labour blocked him. There's been all sorts of tit-for-tat briefings against each other. And it just reminds people that Labour are an unhappy ship. They're a fractious bunch. And it's the last thing that Anas Sarwar needs at this moment in time.
Definitely. I think maybe instinctively Anas Sarwar might quite like Andy Burnham as Labour leader and Prime Minister. I think they might be quite well aligned on, him coming from that Metro Mayor background. I mean, it's almost like a devolved situation in Manchester. I think instinctively Anas Sarwar would be quite on good terms with Burnham. But as you say, it's going to be absolutely honking for Labour's election chances in May if Labour are ripping themselves to bits. I mean, there's no doubt that they need some sort of change. I think it's fair to say that Starmer is not connecting with the voters, and somebody like Burnham might do a better job at combating reform and just looking like he might bring Labour back into contention for the next Westminster election. But man, Sarwar must be just dreading that all breaking out in the coming months.
Senior Labour figures didn't want him to stand in the by-election because they felt like if that was to happen, then there'd also be a by-election for the mayor post. And then a lot of the UK-wide resources that Labour have would be sucked into fighting that against reform. And so, I think Anas Sarwar, Jackie Baillie, while they like Andy Burnham, they thought that would be a massive distraction.
I do see the reasoning makes sense. They don't want a Greater Manchester mayoral election. The danger that reform could win that would be, if Burnham goes, despite the fact he's regarded as having done a very good job. I think that's him. I'm not sure it's the party, and I think there'd be a big risk to losing it. I think, ironically, if Sarwar does win, that kind of saves Keir Starmer's job.
It would certainly give him a wee boost, wouldn't it? If Labour managed to turn it around in Scotland.
Yeah, I think that saves him.
The interesting thing will be how much of a presence we see from Keir Starmer during the Scottish election. Will he even? I'm sure he'll have to show face, but it'll be minimal, I should think.
I mean, people keep saying that Andy Burnham is really popular in the Labour Party, but he's a bit of a Marmite figure.
Well, I think a lot of people consider him to have abandoned the field when the party was in a major power struggle between left and right, and he basically took the half, disappeared up to Manchester. And I think a lot of people in the party see him as someone who never really stood and fought for that more centrist position. So I'm not sure where his home, and I'm not sure where his.
Well,
power
there
base
is a joke. There is a joke about him, which is a Brownite, a Blairite, and a Corbynite walk into a bar, and the barman says, "What are you having, Andy?"
Hey, they always are the best.
he's been on a political journey. Let's put
Yeah.
it that way.
Yeah.
He started off as being like to the right of Blair when he was in government, and then I think famously he didn't resign from Corbyn's cabinet or shadow cabinet. So he's nimble politically.
Yeah, but that's a good thing, and if he can, but I just don't think because of his nimbleness, some might call it
Opportunism.
opportunism or lack of political mettle. Because of that, I'm not sure where his power base is. I just don't know what his
No,
who's really behind him and wanting him in. I see that the Labour left is sort of aligning itself with him, but again, I think that's just because they hate Keir Starmer.
I mean, 50 Labour MPs signed a letter complaining about it, but 50 Labour MPs will sign a letter complaining about anything. So
yeah, I mean,
I think Downing Street will be relaxed about that.
There's also the shadowy hand of Angela Rayner in all this. She's. There's talk of it could be sort of a double ticket with Burnham and Rayner, and then some sort of pact that one takes over after the other. I mean, one just to go back to Holyrood. I mean, one Labour figure I think should play a bigger part and could really help is another ex Prime Minister Gordon Brown. I mean, you'd like to see more of him, and maybe his influence.
He helps with a certain demographic.
I think he certainly does. Yeah,
65 plus. Yeah. I think the older voter who respects him. I think the younger generation probably don't remember him. The
well, I mean,
20s.
But
you
need.
If you remember his speech a few days before the referendum, which was probably the best speech I think by any opponent of independence, he does speak to a certain type of voter.
Yes, I think. I think his presence would be key. And again, like you say, it does appeal to older voters.
So let's just move from politics to Disney and Reform UK's Mickey Mouse tax policies. So Malcolm Offord, who was the hand-picked Scottish leader, hand-picked by Nigel Farage, basically unveiled a tax cut policy earlier this week, which I think is in two stages. One is income tax alignment with the rest of the UK, basically undoing the SNP's tax rises, and then going one step further and going below the UK tax rates. And this will cost, drumroll, £3.7 billion, and apparently will all be achieved by rejigging and reforming quangos.
Oh,
Smitty, are you convinced?
You probably guessed not. I love when the right wing wants to cut tax massively. They always say they can sort it out through cutting red tape. This red tape, I don't know where that is. They always say they can make things more efficient. They can cut red tape. They can get rid of all these quangos, things that everyone hates. I mean, nobody's going to go to the barricades to defend like red tape and quangos, right? But we all know that the only way you get public sector spending cuts of that sort is to shut down your local hospital, to stop the rebuilding of your local school. So which school, which hospital is he not going to build? Because people will be voting for reform because they've been convinced that immigration is the biggest issue that they face in their life. They need to wake up, they need to stop being dunderheads, and they need to think straight. If they vote for Offord and he comes in with all this massive cuts, your local school that's set to get rebuilt where your kids go, that'll not be happening. Your local hospital will be in absolute dire straits. The public services you rely on, the roads, everyone likes to moan about the potholes, don't they? None of them will be getting fixed under Malcolm Offord. So I love it when he comes out with stuff like that because it exposes what it really is, which is a small state, right winger.
Ben, so is it a policy, a substance, or is it a fairy tale produced by a bunch of
Can I
chancellors?
just double check? Scottish Labour are proposing to rebalance taxes to the UK level. Is that not?
No, they're not.
Are they not? I thought.
No, they're
that was-
proposing a targeted tax cut at lower and middle income earners, not the full suite of taxes.
Not bringing it fully back.
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure what the policy. No. So I know the Conservatives are. I think income tax should be the same UK wide. Devolving it was a mistake, and it should be. I just don't think it's fair that in a country, and the United Kingdom is the country, some people pay more income tax than others.
So put aside the fairness of it. Put aside the fair. Do you really think that we can shake down Scottish Enterprise and SEPA and find £4 billion?
Well, what Malcolm Offord was saying. So the day one, there's a rebalancing to the UK wide rates and a 1p cut below. The rest, so that's 2 billion. I think the other 1.7, the other 1p cut, and then another 1p cut are dependent on economic targets being met. So it's actually only 2 billion he needs to find on day one, which is still
that case,
only 2 billion.
Still a lot of money, but
only 5 hospitals.
The idea then is that a 1p cut then brings in economic growth, and it brings in companies expand and they recruit, and the economy starts to, which has been lagging behind. Scotland lags behind the rest of the UK.
But in order to get to that, how are they going to find that 2 billion?
Well, he's said he's cutting savings.
Every government comes in, we're going to cut waste, we're going to cut red tape, and it actually goes up because they don't know how government works, and then they get into power, they realise they actually need these public bodies, they need the civil service.
Don't need all of them though. Some of them are
okay. You can have a redundancy round, but £2 billion.
It's a lot.
They're a bunch of chancellors.
The reason the reason that Liz Truss lasted about 5 minutes as PM is because she followed much the same logic. She was like, if we just cut government spending, cut taxes, everyone will love us, there'll be economic growth, and we'll all skip off happily into the future. And we'll not have to shut any hospitals or schools. But as you know, it wasn't the trade unions or the far left that stopped Liz Truss in her tracks. It was that paragon of left-wing thinking, the markets. They collapsed because clever people who deal with lots and lots of money know that if you massively cut government spending, it restricts and lessens economic growth. And that is why the markets rebelled against Liz Truss. I don't think Scotland going its own way on that would necessarily lead to a market collapse. No,
because there are no. I mean, as we know, Holyrood's budget is a real budget. There's no market impact.
But the point is, the economic growth. The markets realised Liz Truss's budget would kill economic growth. So I'm not sure that cutting tax and cutting public spending is the leads us to the promised land of great economic growth.
Well, this plan makes the Truss tax cuts look modest.
It makes them look sensible and measured. Yeah, and no one's ever said that with Liz Truss.
Bringing tax back to the same level as the rest of the UK.
But that's a sort of exercise in just sort of abstract thinking. It's how do you pay for that? People are sick of politicians coming in with grand promises and then failing to deliver on them because they don't have
governments throughout the world and throughout history have promised and delivered tax cuts. The money is found.
Reagan did in the 80s. Reagan promised tax cuts.
And what he did was the deficit ballooned after he did that.
He just
not
borrowed.
A very conservative thing to do.
Borrowed lots of money.
But the SNP have put these tax rates up. So... And the money they've raised goes into, much of it goes into extra welfare spending. I do take the point. He's going to have to find somewhere else. He can't. And again, the Russell Finlay has done an event today where he's spoken about the Scottish welfare system and maybe, taking some money back out of that to pay for.
Well, see, if you look at Russell's plan, I think he's saying he wants to reintroduce the 2-child benefit cap. So he wants to put more kids into poverty. Well done, Russell. But that policy, I think, only costs about 150 million quid, which is not that much compared to the £2 billion that Offord is going to have to find in order to fund these tax cuts. And just beware of right-wing politicians talking about government waste. If you look at the two biggest bits of the devolved budget, the health service and local government, You cannot find £2 billion without cutting those two areas. So it'll be, as Smitty says, hospitals that suffer, patients that suffer, and it'll be your leisure centres that close, your kids' education that gets cut. It's not going to come from slashing a few civil servants.
Well, again, I come back to the people in England, Wales, and Northern Ireland pay lower rates of tax. And what would be different? What's different in Scotland that we have to pay this extra money for?
I tell you what's different, because I think the check was in the post on this. Scots pay higher income tax, and whether you like
free tuition,
whether you like it or not, and I think there's a case for revisiting these things. We have free university tuition, we have free personal care for the elderly, free prescriptions. All these free things are disproportionately benefit, I would say, the middle class, but they do get something for that extra income tax that they pay.
Yeah.
So it's not like they're paying higher income tax and getting nothing in return. They are, and I think there's probably a case for actually the income tax rises coming in an earlier stage, because for years, middle class Scots were getting these things and not having to contribute a little bit more.
Just to point out as well to viewers, this is often a sort of misconception. Most prescriptions in England and Wales are free because it's means tested. You're not getting unemployed and poor people paying for lots and lots of money for prescriptions. It's people like John Swinney, people like us that have to pay. And equally, there are bursaries, there are schemes available for tuition. There are personal care can be free for if you're below a certain. So that it's not just a complete Wild West. Everyone pays for it. So you go back to that system and you say, look, if you can afford to pay for something, you pay for it.
There would be an intellectual case for having targeting in these areas, and then you can reduce taxation. With the money that you've generated. But he's not saying that. He's not saying we're going to scrap free prescriptions or we're going to introduce tuition fees. He's saying we're going to have a second look at quangos. It's not credible.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, I mean, it's always the lie from the right, isn't it? That we'll cut tax and nobody will suffer. Clearly, if you cut tax, the poor always suffer. It's always the poor that suffers. So the very people that Offord is trying to target for votes, try to bribe them or convince them that their enemy isn't the rich, but is the asylum seeker up the stairs in Tower Block, then they're going to, people might well fall for that, but they shouldn't fall for it. He can only get those cuts by absolutely hammering the public services that people depend on. And by the way, if he does want to scrap tuition fees and he does for all universal free prescriptions, there is a case to be made for that. But he's not going to make those.
No.
He's not making that case. He's trying to have his cake and eat it. He's trying to tell people he can cut services. He can cut tax, and people won't suffer in the slightest.
I thought it was a very Tory sort of announcement. Like you say, Liz Truss. It's a very sort of conservative party. You can tell he's an ex-Tory. It wasn't a very reformed. There was barely any mention of immigration.
At how heavy they're going on this tax stuff. It's almost like they have an ideological commitment to it, but tactically it's not very clever. The reason Boris, won over the Red Wall in the north of England is because actually Boris was quite centrist in terms of the economy. He was into public spending. He was into government intervention to promote economic growth in the north. Boris was actually quite left-wing in that sense.
Yeah,
and I think Reform would have done well to keep that in mind and maybe present themselves as more Labour than Labour.
I wish you were on the podcast a few years ago. I used to come on here saying Boris was the best Prime Minister this country. He was brought low. He could have been brilliant. Rebalancing, not all the rest of it.
Did I accept your point?
No, you certainly didn't.
I can't remember that.
Just on that, I mean, Boris won, get Brexit done. It was simple, 3-word slogan. And there was this public feeling that I've had enough of these we voted for it, let's just get it done. And to come back to what could play into Labour's hands, there's this feel, if they can come up with a slogan of basically give someone else a go, it could pay off.
Yeah. My favourite bit of the week was, I wasn't at the Reform event, it was Chris McCall, but it was well reported. Malcolm Offord has been teased a lot about his wealth and his love of yachts, and at the event he compared himself to the character in the Deacon Blues song Dignity, which is about a council worker who saves up his money and buys a dinghy. Marvellously, Deacon Blue put out a statement saying, "It appalls us to see the lyrics of any of our songs being used to bolster a campaign and ideology which is completely at odds with what the song and we as a band believe." Well said, Ricky Ross.
Well said, Ricky Ross. I don't think Malcolm Offord has seen the contents of a sunblessed bag for many decades. But, you know, he is a working class guy made good. He's got that in his locker, you know, and maybe he was a big fan of Deacon Blue. I was more of a big country man myself.
I saw someone on social media had pointed out that Ricky Ross attended a fee-paying school and Malcolm Offord's from a state school in Greenock. So I don't know. It's just a topsy-turvy world at the moment in politics.
A fair point.
Malcolm Offord will be a real gone kid by election time. There we are. I just thought of that, by the way. Just thought of that.
Wow, I can see how you're in it. Amazing.
But not a stand-up comedian. Yeah.
Okay, look, thanks very much to Mark and to Ben for joining me, and thanks also to Henrik from the Daily Record video team who produced this episode. You can listen to us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, or you can watch the episode on the Daily Record YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram and TikTok for the latest news and the best bits of the podcast.
We will never turn our back on a single sport.
We've got to wrestle with those challenges.
This is the same nonsense we have heard time and time again.
This is our country. Let's fix it together.